Folks, I don't know how to start this video other than to say I have been looking for this kind of year for 12 years. For about 12 years, I've participated in some capacity or another in the Wyoming legislature. And what I have watched this year is very, very different. Good legislation is being passed on issues like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that's coming up. We have a wonderful education savings account piece of legislation that passed overwhelmingly in the House Education Committee, and Representative Ocean Andrew worked very hard on that. And it was wonderful to see, after all of that diligent labor, that vote came through. Secondly, we also watched several bills pass just today. This is Friday, toward the end of the week of the second week. We watched two bills. First, one that protects girls in their own sport and makes sure that males, biological males, cannot come in and harm opportunities that young girls deserve in having their own sport. Secondly, they have defended now the right for girls to have private places, private restrooms, private locker rooms. And those both passed the House Education Committee 9-0. It was just a wonderful result and quite different from what we have seen over the last several years. I also want to let you know about something that happened on Wednesday of this week. There were two bills on abortion. One, the regulation of surgical abortion, and secondly, just requiring for chemical abortions to have an ultrasound requirement. They both passed overwhelmingly, and they are going very well through the entire legislative process. The next thing I wanted to point you to was House Bill 43. This is age verification for websites with harmful material. It has become apparent with modern technology that many states have needed to pass legislation that would protect children and ensure that there is some sort of age verification if they're going to get on highly pornographic websites. Wyoming is finally catching up, and this is great legislation that's been brought to address that issue. Again, that's Representative Martha Lawley, and I'm so appreciative of the hard work that she's done on that issue. Another bill I want to bring your attention to is Senate File 98. That's Senator Olson's bill that ensures that school board trustees now would need to just let us know what party are they affiliated with. Now, for years I've heard people say that school boards, that's a nonpartisan position. But it's become abundantly clear over the last 10 to 15 years that these are partisan positions, and there are issues that it's good to know where a person is going to be coming from in making those kind of decisions. I think it's just a very clear, common sense bill, and I'm so thankful that he has brought that for our consideration. I want to share with you a piece of legislation that is near and dear to my heart. In 2015, I brought a piece of legislation called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. That year, we made it successfully through the House, and sadly, the Senate president sat on it with about 15, 16 other bills and just pocket vetoed it by leaving it in his drawer. That year, in 2015, 16 states attempted to pass the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. We could all see how important it was going to become. Sadly, only two states were able to get it through, Indiana and Arkansas. That year, I also had to battle back on a piece of legislation that would have baked in the terms sexual orientation and gender identity throughout the Wyoming Code. Right in the middle of that battle is when I found out that my mother had passed away. She had gone to heaven. And so it became something very near and dear to me, understanding religious freedom and trying to let people know that you cannot use ideology to try to silence Christians. And we've now seen over the last 10 years how often that has happened. Just to the south of us in Colorado, there's a cake baker that has been hammered several times by the state of Colorado, and it took a Supreme Court decision to step in and say, you cannot do that. Religious Freedom Restoration Act is a piece of legislation that really helps in those kind of situations. It pulls back an idea called strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny says that you have to have a compelling governmental interest if the government's going to step in and infringe your First Amendment rights. And secondly, if they're going to do so, they have to use the least restrictive means. And so when you look at how important that is, in 1993, this was considered a bipartisan issue. It passed unanimously through the U.S. House of Representatives, and it lost only 4 votes or so, as near unanimous in the U.S. Senate. Then President Bill Clinton signed it into law, and people have always understood this is something that helps when it comes to protecting the First Amendment, the foundational amendment of what it means to be American. It's time for Wyoming to stand up for this legislation. This is the year it should be passed, and it can be passed. But I ask for you to reach out to your state representative, to your state senator, and let them know how important this legislation is to you, and ensure that it works its way through the Wyoming legislative process so that we can finally celebrate strict scrutiny and see that the First Amendment is vitally important in the state of Wyoming. Thank you. Here at Wyoming Family Alliance, we believe that it's important for you to stay informed on important legislation that is happening here at the Wyoming Capitol. So we would like for you to go to wyofambilltracker.com, and you can see the different pieces of legislation we are watching, and you can even weigh into the process. We also have a video that you can watch. It's kind of a recap of the last week, and you can look at all of the pieces of legislation that were argued not only in committee, but also on the House or Senate floor, and you can stay up to date on those issues as well. Thank you so much for logging in. Please look at our other video on the great legislation that is happening here at the Wyoming Capitol.